Dirk, every company, every sector coming out with just no visibility for 2020. What are you looking for to get that visibility? What are some of the roadmarks?
The first roadmark is the lockdowns to finish, because with the lockdowns around the world, it's sometimes impossible for us to distribute our products or to sell them in certain channels like the traditional trade where we sell a lot of our biscuit and our chocolate. So getting out of the lockdowns and having the possibility to have normal distribution, normal sales, that is the first the milestone, I would say. After that, it's going to be to take a look at what is the consumer doing, how are they reacting. What we're seeing at the moment is that consumers are spending more time at home and they are eating differently as a consequence from that. And you've probably seen all the effects on restaurants and so on. So in our case, that means that they do snack more at home, particularly biscuits and chocolates. And so we see an increased consumption at home. Going forward, I'm expecting that the consumer still will be quite resistant or reluctant to be all the time out and about, to go into crowded stores, go into crowded restaurants. They will not do that. So we expect that that in-home consumption will continue and that the out-of-home consumption will still be mitigated for the foreseeable future. So how that is going to settle, that is kind of the second big milestone we have to wait for to see how that balances out. Those would be the two big ones. And then there's a number of other milestones. How big is the recession going to be? Are they going to decrease their spending? What's the effect in emerging markets of some of the devaluations? How is the situation going to evolve as it relates to some of these emerging markets and commodities? And so that's probably the third big one. How big is the recession going to be?
So let's tackle sort of what that last one is, which is supply chain issues. So let's say that we open up, everyone wants to go back to work, we're going to go snack the way we used to. How easy is it to ramp up your business? Talk to me about the supply chain issues, et cetera.
Yes, at the moment for us, 99% of our plants are functioning. I would say 30% of those plants are not having the output that you would normally expect. That can be 10, 20% lower, but 70% is having the same or higher output. So from a supply chain perspective, I wouldn't call it ideal, but it is not dramatic. Then we are in the biscuits, chocolate, gum, and candy business. And so we don't see any disruption of our suppliers. We don't see any disruption of our plants being able to run, except for the fact that it's sometimes difficult for our people to show up in certain countries like India. They just can't get to the plants because it's not allowed. In the US, we've seen higher levels of absenteeism. So the biggest issue that we face at the moment to keep our plants at that 100% level is to have sufficient qualified people to run them. But it's easing, it's getting better. The US was the worst, but in the last 2 weeks, we've seen a lot more of our normal employees coming back. We used to run with a lot more temps. That is now changing. And so we seem to be getting out of it at the moment.
So nevertheless, there was an interesting story on the Bloomberg yesterday about some companies trying to get Washington to help them with liabilities as they bring back workers. Like they don't want to be on the hook if then a worker gets sick. What do you think about that? What are you seeing in terms of that? How are you managing something like that?
Yes, so far we haven't seen that yet, but there is a risk and there is a worry. Our stance in that is, A, we need to take care of our people and do whatever we can to make sure that they are working in the most safest circumstances possible. That means distancing, that means tracing, that means sending them home if they've been in contact with somebody, that means separations, and so on and so on. There's a whole range of things we do, checks before they come into the plant and so on. So I think it's critical that people feel safe, the frontline workers, that they feel safe in what they do. And we as companies need to try to do everything we can to help them with that. After that, it's about business continuity. We're supplying food to the country, and we need to keep on working. This is absolutely essential. And I think most people understand that. They are prepared to do a tough job, but they want to do it in circumstances where they feel protected and they feel rewarded for it. Mm-hmm. After that, there is a risk, but I hope that everybody will have the right senses and use some common sense to not try to take advantage of this situation, and hopefully the situation will not be too bad in that sense.
Do you mentioned sort of workers having a hard time getting to factories in India, for example. Do you anticipate that we'll see a simplification of supply chains, maybe a retrenchment to different locations after this?
I do expect that. We had already started that movement. Most of our plants are in our big markets. We are not a company that produces in a few areas and then ships around the world, just because of the nature of our product. They're a low spending type of product, so we want to be as close to our consumers as we possibly can be. I think that will be amplified, that sort of a movement, because of this pandemic. I think you will see another simplification, which is to make a lot less products, because as this crisis arrived, for us in the food industry, to have sufficient inventories and sufficient product for the consumer was absolutely critical. And if you have a wide range of products with many different SKUs, you're bound to have more issues. You have more changeovers in your plants. You have to run higher inventories and so on. So I think we will see a reduction of the offer of different products for at least for a while, in order to smoothen out and to make the supply chain work more smoothly. And so we're doing that. We're reducing our SKUs and trying to keep everything as efficient as we possibly can.
Can you give me a little bit more insight then into how you look at your inventory? Because you're absolutely right. Like what you might have had in inventory 2 months ago is not necessarily maybe what we're eating right now. So how do you, as a CEO of a major international business, prepare for that for the next 12 months?
Well, you talk a lot to consumers. We spend a lot of time reaching out, understanding what they're thinking, and trying to anticipate that. And then the second thing we try to do is to be flexible, agile, and to change whatever direction we're taking if need to. So at the moment, to give you an example, what we're seeing is that family packs are increasing quite a lot. Consumers are at home with their kids. They want to have their Oreos, and they buy more, and they want to buy the bigger pack. So we had to make a major change in our production and in our supply chain towards family packs. Going forward in emerging markets, we need to reach the right price points, because it's critical for products like ours that we are available at the right price, which probably means changing the size, changing the pack. So a whole exercise needs to take place, preparing our ranges for what the consumer will want in the future. But the main thing is trying to anticipate, trying to understand where the consumer is going, and then adapt as soon as you possibly can.
And then I guess last question, how does that affect your outlay in terms of CapEx? Because not only do you have to deal with production lines and how you have to rejigger your manufacturing part of it and your processing part, but also in what you're actually supplying. So how do you think about that in terms of capital allocation then for the next year?
Well, we're going to tread very carefully as part of our overall balance sheet, and we have a strong balance sheet and we're going to keep it like that, and our liquidity. This doesn't feel like a moment for big capital investments until we are clearer on how things will settle, what type of products the consumer wants, and so on and so on. So we will tread very carefully, I would say, in the next 12 months. And then as the things settle down, decide on where we want to invest. That seems prudent in a short-term situation. And that seems also very prudent, as we don't know where the consumer is heading as it relates to snacking.